Hello and welcome back to Fullerton College's Pre-Press Print 75 and 77 course. This is your professor, Ben Hewitt, and today we're looking one last time, hopefully, at Illustrator's Gradient and Mesh tools. This time we're finally going to use the Mesh tool, and we're going to be able to directly compare Gradient Freeform tool, the new quasi-mesh tool that comes in the form of gradients in the newest versions of Illustrator, but we're going to compare it back to the good old faithful Mesh tool that I, spoilers, like better. You'll be able to make your assigned second sheet of gradients from this week's project based off this video, which are my kind of quasi-1990s looking graphics. But they're not meant to be overly complex or meant to introduce you to the idea of how you can use gradients in illustration as shading to make objects look a little bit more interesting and round. And yes, this is dated, but so am I. Cough, cough, I'm pushing 40, guys. Anyways, let's take a look here at what we're working on. So first, we're going to play around with the cylinder here on the bottom of the page, and we're going to create a three-dimensional looking quasi-cylinder using some swatches, a little bit of some other stuff as well. So the first thing I'm going to do here is these three items. Let's just go ahead and get rid of the outline. Boom. And we're going to apply a gradient. Actually, you know what? I'd rather do from the swatch. Gradient swatch is what we actually did for the project. So we'll go to gradients. Let's make it a metallic can. Lead, cast iron. Here, let's use tin. It's a tin can, right? Tin. Tin may not be stark enough to see. Let's use this one. Steel. But bronze and copper look better. Let's use bronze. There we go. So, already looking pretty good. All we really have to do to make this thing look about right is to rotate the angle off a little bit to look like it's reflecting light a different direction. And if you really want to be clever about it, you could swap them and move it over WYSIWYG until the lines line up like this. There you have a kind of three-dimensional metal-looking object. It's not the most high-fidelity graphics you've ever seen in your life, but even without combining these things, this is still a separate oval on top of a rectangle. Just stacking them and making sure that the different patterns line up, you have yourself a pretty decent looking little graphic here. Again, this is just to teach you how to use this. It's not the most useful item in modern design. Now let's play with some other things here. I'm going to make 3 copies of this just for copies' sakes. Let's get rid of the stroke and just go with pure white circles on this. Let's also assign these the same one. There we go. Now, there's 3 ways of making this appear round. The first one is a good old-fashioned, whoa, that's awkward. Let's see, gonna need to pull off some of those. Distribute these around, flip it, and there you have a ball that's more or less lit from the dead center. I know even if I make this for more realistic, it's still not going to look that realistic because this is not how realistic things look. But we can still do better than this. Even this one, get rid of the darkest of dark, moving that around. You kind of get a round-ish look by darkening the edges of the circle. But it's very rare that you ever look at something with light directly ahead of you, unless you're looking at it wearing like one of those hiking or automotive repair headlamps. So other than that, let's take a look at other ways of doing this. Now, these other tools, if we use the gradient mesh tool, oh, it still doesn't quite do what we needed to do without making some changes. So I forgot about a thing here. Let's go ahead and be nice if we just add that to swatches. So I'm going to make new swatches. One that is C10, M14, Y30. What did I do up here? Oh, that's what I did. New swatch, there we go. Except it won't be a gradient swatch. Oh, let me do this better. I say it was, oh man. Sorry guys, 10, 14, 30, 0. There's 1, and this can be dragged into the swatches here. I may just end up breaking down and using the ones that are up there, but you can go through and find out what the colors were that were making this. You can also find out what this color is, and this is 22, 32, 69, 22. Twenty-two, 32, 69, dudes. Oh. 69, 22. Drag that here into swatches and get the darkest one of the same thing again. Take this one here will be good. 21, 59, 77, 43. 21, 59, 77, 43. $53. There we go. Sorry, whenever I'm chanting those numbers, I'm just trying to remember what my CMYK values are. And in case you're wondering, the reason I kept switching to a solid swatch was because if I had a gradient highlighted, it wouldn't override and let me build a swatch up here. So now with this, if I say I want, let's just go ahead and make that a solid color. Let me get the darkest one. And then I can hit the gradient freeform mesh, and I should be able to give myself a highlight, say freeform, and a low light. So if I move the low light over and I move the highlight over, I have my whitish highlight there. My low light, I'm actually going to turn into a different color. The main thing's still going to be the mid-tone. Well, this is where this thing gets a little bit trickier. So we move the dark one there, the middle one to the middle, the light one to the top. We kind of get the same look there. So that's a little bit better of a round object, although it's not perfect. If we're going to the perfect one that I really do like, let me go ahead and make it the middle color. And we're going to use this and do it as little as possible, because the less you do this, the better. And you'll see why in a moment. Under the gradient tool on your toolbar is the mesh tool, which you can choose by pressing U if you want to use keyboard shortcuts, you shortcutty people. So you click on the mesh tool. The mesh tool, when you click inside here, is going to create a grid of points. And every point or line segment inside this grid can have a color assigned to it. And I'll show you what it looks like when we do it. Let me zoom in on this. So there's one click. You'll also notice, if you look at this, that the grid is built out of Bezier curves. That's interesting. We know how to work with those, except it doesn't quite work the way you think it's going to this time. Now, instead of just talking about the curve, the colors actually follow the curve. Let me show you what I mean. If I select this point here, just that one point in the mesh tool, I tell it I want that point to be the light color, the Bezier handlebars that would have controlled just the contours of lines now quasi follows it as if it was the contours of the surface of an object, highlighting it with a lighter color. So the color controls, it moves the same distance and gradients into the next color at the same rate the line would have moved straight before it started to bend. I hope this makes sense the way I'm talking about it, because it is basically the Bezier pen tool controls, but controlling instead of what shape a line is, the line, it does still do the line, but the line you do is instead a command line telling it how and when to blend colors. If we take the mesh tool again, I'm going to click down here towards the bottom of the ball, but this time I don't want it to be bright. I'm going to take my direct select tool, find that point there, and this time I'm going to tell it I want it to be the dark color. That didn't quite work out the way I'd hoped, so let's undo that. Let's just click and drag. Actually, let's do this. Let's use the point here on the outside and make that the dark color. I can also choose a line segment if I wanted, and I can make that the color. Point is, you can drag and drop these too. Whoa, it's too much. But by creating not too much space. Let's do one more. Not too many grid points, because when it gets too complicated, it just starts to look kind of meh. But you can start dragging and dropping and saying, I want this quadrant to be this color. And you can make sure the middle quadrant is a normal color. Yeah. And then that point is that color. And you can start to make a much more realistic shaded object. And actually, I think that looks pretty decent, if you ask me. I mean, visually, it looks pretty accurate. It doesn't mean it looks great. It's not something you necessarily want in a design or a graphic, but there's how to do them. I really do recommend you use the mesh tool for this. The mesh tool is also useful for irregular shapes. And so here's another reason that I like the mesh tool. I jumped away to get a, say, heart pulled out of a glyph menu there, just so you show a more complex shape. So if I want to make this kind of cheesy and more roundy looking, I could choose a red color as a basic color. But then if I go ahead and take the mesh tool, I can start to apply complex highlights and say, let's make that a little bit brighter up there. And even just that much makes a difference in making a rounder looking object. If I make the whole thing even darker than this, let's make the regular red 20% black so you can actually see it a little better. And we drag that orange into the highlight point. You end up with a little bit more of a blended 3D looking object. Some people like these things, some people don't. Again, in my defense from all this, these videos show you how to use them and how to create them, not necessarily why or in what case should they be used. There's a lot more learning and a lot more working with clients and figuring out what is good and what is not before you're really ready to unleash these on the unsuspecting world. But for now, we're going to practice with them and see what we can do. So looking forward to see your guys' entries. Thank you for your time waiting for me to put this together and going through all this with me. Till next time.